like to begin by bringing Dr. Tom Rogers onto the stage. Tom is our Education Outreach Manager, as Robin said. Before joining our staff, he's been a teacher at the University of English Literature. He's a Doctor of English Literature. And he was also chairman of our executive committee for some years, a few years ago. So he's got great experience. He is specialising currently, amongst other things, on the implications of the legislation introducing compulsory sex education throughout the school years, and a consultation which is due to be announced. So, Tom, would you like to just go first, please?
Good morning. Well, as you know, if you've been keeping up with our Safe at School campaign in recent years, or if you've caught one of Antonia's talks at a previous conference, SPUC has been concerned in recent years now with this fight to keep immoral, anti-life sex education out of our children's classroom. And furthermore, we've been fighting these moves to make such sex education compulsory and to retain the legal right of parents to withdraw their children or to have such issues taught according to their values. We've been led by this belief that parents are the primary educators of their children and they need to have their say and control. So this aim of compulsory sex education has been pursued in recent years as part of a concerted campaign spearheaded by a powerful and well-funded sex education lobby and supported by large sections of the media and within Parliament by a well-coordinated group of activist MPs. And as John alluded to there, in March of this year we faced quite a major setback. The government announced that it was introducing amendments to a major piece of child welfare legislation, the Children and Social Work Bill, which was going through Parliament at the time. So first of all, I'll just explain what happened with those amendments and the implications of it. So Section 34 of the Children and Social Work Act makes a number of key changes to the teaching of sex and relationships education, which up to now schools could choose not to teach, or if they did, they had significant freedom to teach it in their own way, since the subject was not part of the national curriculum. And perhaps in an attempt to allay concerns about teaching sex education to primary age children, the new law, at least on the surface, stipulates two different ways in which compulsory sex education will be implemented in the primary and the secondary sectors. So for primary schools, we're presented with this ambiguous new subject entitled relationships education, for which there is no right of withdrawal for parents in any kind of primary school, whether it's a communities school, faith school, foundation, free or independent school, all schools, anything that legally constitutes a school. And it's been announced that the content of relationships education will, however, be subject to a public consultation to take place autumn this year, a date as yet unconfirmed. But I'll talk about that briefly more in a moment. But despite its fairly innocuous sounding name, this relationships education is highly likely to be used to promote the LGBT and other sexualising agendas to primary age children. And for secondary schools, what is termed relationships and sex education, or RSE, is being made a compulsory subject for all secondary schools, again, of whatever kind, faith schools, free schools, independent schools, state schools, all of them. The language of the Act is quite ambiguous, so it's as yet unclear to what extent parents could also still withdraw their children from RSE in secondary schools as they can now. There's theoretically a right of withdrawal, but as we'll see in a moment, that's been undermined. One of the dangerous things about the Act is the scope it gives the Secretary of State to regulate for content and approach, and possibly the right of withdrawal at secondary school. In fact, the government states in its policy document on RSE, published in March this year, that one of the issues subject to consultation will be to, quote, to clarify the age at which a young person may have the right to make their own decisions. So, in other words, it could be decided that a child at school may have the right to override a decision by their parents to withdraw them from relationships and sex education at whatever age is ultimately decided by the Secretary of State. So these changes are due to come into effect for the start of the 2019-20 academic year, so September 2019. But prior to that, the government has announced a public consultation in order to help determine statutory guidance over the content of these new compulsory subjects, as well as other important related matters. And then that guidance will be published early next year. So the idea is that the government publishes this statutory guidance on the content of relationships, education, and then that gives the schools a year to prepare themselves and get their curriculum ready. However, we're very concerned about the consequences of this new legislation. As pro-life MP Sir Edward Lee commented in Parliament, it is understandable that some will view this as a state takeover bid for parenting. In contrast, sadly, the Catholic Education Service, chaired by Archbishop McMahon, welcomed the new legislation. They said that, quote, high quality RSE was very much part of the mission of Catholic schools, and they look forward to working with the government in shaping this new guidance. And in the workshops that I'll be running on this later in the day, I'll show you more of what some of the documents that have been issued by the Catholic Education Service have been saying about such issues as homosexuality and transgenderism, things like that. So what is the justification for making this relationships education compulsory? Well, it was presented as very much a child's welfare issue. It was necessary to, equip children for life in modern Britain. It was claimed that relationships education will help prevent children, protect them from sexual abuse, from all the kind of sexual risks of digital technology, so-called sexting, internet grooming, pornography. However, as we've seen, there's no evidence that any of these such school-based interventions of this kind have worked in the past. We can only look to the failure of the teenage pregnancy strategy, for example. And there's often very little regard for the unintended consequences of these kind of interventions. In fact, I believe that Antonia is going to touch on it later, but the evidence that we've had from the serious case reviews of child exploitation and from Rochdale and other places, they've all stated that one of the key factors was this sort of cultural normalisation of underage sex and the way that that's being facilitated by government policy, free contraception without parental knowledge, and so forth. Children are most exposed to the dangers of these kinds of digital technologies outside of the school, and a 1-hour lesson on such matters can never replace the ongoing loving vigilance of parents in the home with regard to their children's development and behaviour. But in any case, we know that all these scares about sexting and things like that, they're mainly being used as a Trojan horse to enforce this new official state ideology. So I'll just briefly talk about some of the things that are likely to arise in this consultation and the sort of things we want you to respond to. So some of the key issues which, as a parent or teacher or someone who's taking part in this consultation will have the right to comment on, will be, first of all, over content. So what should be included or not included in the content of relationships education for primary school children. Well, we know that LGBT issues are almost certain to be incorporated into relationships education at primary school. The government has stated that it's going to be working with Stonewall, Terence Higgins Trust, and other LGBT organisations when deciding the details of what will be taught. So it's imperative that parents fight to keep this damaging LGBT ideology out of their children's classrooms. The legislation provides for no regard of the central importance and significance of marriage, at least real marriage between man and woman, and family life. The Act only speaks vaguely about the teaching of healthy relationships, which of course is a very subjective term and can easily be distorted. So it's crucial that parents and others strongly assert the necessity of preparing children for successful marriage and family life, and they resist this imposition on their children of damaging ideologies and the promotion of immoral and dangerous lifestyle choices. There's been much talk about the need for age-appropriate education. So, there's bound to be a chance for some input in the consultation on what would be an age-appropriate manner for much of this content to be delivered at each developmental stage. Well, we believe strongly that parents know best at what age their children are ready to learn about sexual matters and that they have a right to teach them according to their values. And as I mentioned, the very question of whether we know relationships education is compulsory for primary school children with no opt-out. So there's still theoretically an opt-out for sex education, but we know that the consultation, because it's mentioned in the policy document, is also going to consult, as I said, on at what age children should have a right to make decisions for themselves, to withdraw themselves. So, again, we've got to really respond strongly with an assertion of parents' right as the primary educator and protector of their children. So this new law means that the state really is officially trying to become the lead educator in every child's moral development with regard to marriage and sexuality. So this crosses an important line for us, as up to now the parental opt-out for sex education meant at least that there was some recognition that ultimately parents were the primary educators and mattered more than the state. The question of whether parents should have the right to opt out for this relationships education at primary school, or the question of whether schools should have to teach sex education or not, is the government's already said that that's kind of off limits with the consultation. That's already been decided by the legislation. However, we can use this consultation as an important opportunity to protest our concerns and help to shape these new subjects according to pro-life, pro-family concerns. So it's absolutely critical that we flood this consultation with strong responses, asserting parental rights and the necessity to teach children the importance of marriage and family values, and speak out strongly against the kind of damaging, sexualising agendas that the government is trying to impose on our children. So this consultation, we don't know the exact date yet. We only know autumn 2017, so it could be any time in the next month or so. As soon as it's published, we will be issuing a kind of step-by-step guide to responding, and a briefing to give you the background and ideas for what to say. It's important, always in these consultations, to respond in your own words, so it doesn't seem like it's just part of a mass campaign. But SPUC supporters have responded very well to these consultations in the past. All the responses are published and available, so you can see who's responded. And in the last 2 or 3 previous consultations, we've had a very high proportion of pro-life, pro-family responses. And this is critical for us then building a foundation for our further campaigns, because then we can appeal to the strong response that we've had from this consultation to say the public doesn't want this, parents don't want this. Okay.
Thanks, Tom. This legislation comes into force in 2019, which is not much comfort, but it does give us an opportunity to build a cultural resistance movement. We don't always win legislative battles, unfortunately, but we can sow the seeds for a future protection, in this case of the innocence of children, and ultimately unborn children too, who are damaged through the sexualisation of children, because it's all preparing them for the abortion industry. We're working closely with all the other major groups in this area, working to coordinate to build a resistance movement. So now I want to introduce Antonia Tully, who is, as you know, immensely experienced in all sorts of areas of the society's work, and she's going to be speaking to us about the abortion threat and how we're going to aim, in the first instance, to reduce abortions.
This is a quick follow-on from what Tom was talking about. Last year, if anybody heard me speaking at this conference, I was flagged up the fact that Norman Wells of the Family Education Trust was doing a very serious piece of work, looking at all the serious case reviews on child abuse, Rochdale, Rotherham, Bristol, all around the country. And he was working on a book which is now available. It's called Unprotected. And anybody who wants to engage with this issue of sexualization of children and what's happening should really read this book, because basically what happens in the classroom, everything we've been saying for the past 8 or 10 years, where does it end up? It ends up with child abuse. And this is all fully sort of uncovered and unpacked in this book. It's called Unprotected. There are copies of at the back available for sale, and I would really encourage individuals and branches to buy a copy of this. Just very briefly, the foreword to this book is written by Professor David Payton, who's very well known to many of us. He says, "This report is utterly damning. A clear picture emerges of a culture in which underage sexual activity has come to be viewed as a normal part of growing up." And that's at the heart of it. It's not social services, police, all these do have, but it's the culture where underage sex is presented as normal. And he says it becomes clear that current approaches aimed at improving teenage sexual health have actually frequently facilitated and perpetuated the sexual abuse of young, vulnerable people. So it's on the corner of the table. Please do consider buying a copy of that book. I'm keeping my eye on the clock here because there's a lot to get through. So my topic this morning is to look at or talk briefly about the campaigns that SPUC currently has underway to tackle the scandal of abortion in this country. Our current campaigns are aimed at bringing down the number of abortions in this country. We've got 4,000 abortions every week, the equivalent of 20 passenger planes crashing. We've got to start making a dent in that number. Of course we want the abortion law off the statute book. That isn't going to happen quickly. We've got to start really undermining the foundations of what is happening. So our strategy to bring down abortions is the route that we want to take. We've often discussed how we don't want to try and change the legislation, because it could so easily, once you go into the Act, it could so easily be hijacked by the pro-abortion lobby and made even worse. The idea of time limits, as you all probably know, we don't want to go down that route, though it seems perhaps a sensible route to go down, but it is fraught with dangers. And very interestingly, in the 2016 abortion statistics, I happened to notice, was bringing down the age limit. This is focusing on the very youngest unborn babies. Apparently, in 2016, 92% of abortions were carried out at under 13 weeks, and 81% were carried out at under 10 weeks, which is slightly higher than in 2015, and considerably higher than in 2006, where only 68% of babies under the age of 10 weeks were aborted. So can you see this shift where more and more babies are being aborted at an ever earlier age? So that sort of justifies our decision that we really need to look at another route to undermine the Abortion Act. So what we're looking at is our campaign, which many of you will be familiar with the title, the Miscertification, our Miscertification campaign. And there's a pink booklet available from the literature stall, which really everybody needs to take home a copy. I'm not sure, there might be one in your pack already, but take home more copies to educate more people about the miscertification campaign. Abortion, the 1967 Abortion Act didn't decriminalise abortion, so abortion still remains illegal, but what the Abortion Act did was set out certain limits within which abortions could be performed, and doctors would not be prosecuted if they performed these abortions. And I say in practice, in theory, because of course we know in practice that those limits are ignored, hugely ignored, and all a woman has to say to get the doctor to certify her abortion is that the baby is unwanted, and the doctor is protected by the notion that if he makes the judgment that the woman qualifies for abortion in good faith, then the abortion is legal. So what we have is a situation where doctors are routinely ticking ground C on the Abortion Act to say that the risk of the woman giving birth to the baby, the risk to her mental health of her giving birth to the baby, is greater than if she has the abortion. So in other words, the abortion is better for her mental health. But the doctor isn't looking at the woman's mental health. He is not making, or she is not making an assessment of the woman's mental health. And 97 to 98% of abortions are carried out on mental health grounds. And the reality is that these abortions are in fact illegal because there has been no proper assessment of the woman's mental health. And what is happening is about 500 times a day, doctors are falsely certifying women for abortion. They are miscertifying them. And this important document we have brought out in our 50th anniversary year, Abortion and Women's Health, is arguably the most up-to-date review of the medical evidence of the impact of abortion on women's health anywhere in the world. And I recently sent this to a pro-life GP, and he was stunned by it. He said, you know, this is the most important document I have read in years. So everyone must take a copy of this. You know, this is really the evidence that we need, which supports the abortion miscertification. And here we've really found, if you like, the Achilles heel of the abortion system in this country. There's no getting away from this, the evidence that abortion is deeply, deeply damaging. So our miscertification campaign is our ongoing campaign. We have been travelling the country this year, our 50th anniversary year, talking to many groups and asking people at the grassroots level, please write to your MP and ask him or her to insist that the Secretary of State for Health implements the abortion law strictly. We have, however, in addition to that, a very real and immediate threat which could make abortion massively more widespread in this country if such a thing were possible. And that is the threat of decriminalising abortion. So just very briefly, what are people, what is the pro-abortion lobby after in their bid to decriminalise abortion? Well, I told you that the 1967 Act operates, in theory anyway, within limits, and that Act rests on the 1861 Offences Against the Persons Act. So, in theory, any abortion that falls outside the parameters of the Abortion Act would be illegal because of the 1861 Offences Against the Persons Act, I think clauses 58 and 59, if I remember correctly. And it's that 1861 Act that the abortion lobby is wanting to repeal, so that they want to place abortion outside the law. They want to make it just a medical issue. You know, it's not a medical issue, but that's the thrust of their campaign. This campaign is being supported by the Royal College of Midwives. As we all know, abortion and midwives don't go together at all. In June this year, the British Medical Association voted to support, essentially, decriminalisation of abortion. And the origins of the moves to decriminalise abortion come from, surprise, surprise, the abortion industry itself, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service. And they have launched their campaign last year, and they called it We Trust Women. And we thought about, well, we thought, no, it's not about trusting women. We care about women, which is why we have called our miscertification campaign We Care, the decriminalisation campaign, We Care About Women. So there's this book here where we set out the case against decriminalisation. And in next month, we are holding a mass constituency-based lobby to encourage members and supporters up and down the country to go and see their MP in the constituency and ask their MP to vote against decriminalising abortion. We've already had one attempt in the House of Commons. This was Diana Johnson, the Labour MP for Hull North, who introduced a decriminalisation bill in March of this year. The bill ran out of time, but she won the vote, 172 votes to 142. She said she's going to bring it back, and if she doesn't, there are plenty of other people who will. So we want to get in there to MPs and ask them to vote against decriminalisation, whether your MP is pro-life, whether he's totally against us or sitting on the fence. I know it's tough, but please do try to make an appointment with your MP to put the case against decriminalisation. Our MPs have got to know that there are people in their constituency who care about this issue. And unless we go and tell them, they're not going to know that. For many MPs, there is a significant section of their constituents who didn't vote for them and who may not share their views. So it's important that we get in there. And decriminalisation, by anybody's standards, is a very extreme move. So there may be some MPs, I'm thinking in particular of my own, who will always sit there telling me he wants a woman to be able to choose and he doesn't want to impose his views on anybody else. But I'm hoping that he will vote against something as extreme as this. So this is a document here I'd like you to read, please. We have also a step-by-step guide to organising a meeting with your MP, and critically a reply form to let us know when you have a meeting, the time and the date, and even more critically a feedback form to let us know what your MP said they would do about this issue. So this is our way forward. We are a grassroots organisation. The people that your MP is going to listen to is you, because he's representing, or she is representing you in Parliament. So we hope at headquarters we've been able to supply you with the material that you need to be able to tackle this issue. And so I'll just conclude by recommending these publications to you and asking you to take this important campaign forward. Thank you very much.
Chairman, dear friends and supporters of SPUC, there's an article from the Herald, the Scottish Herald, a national daily newspaper in Scotland, on the literature desk at the back of this conference room. And the article is entitled, "Jacob Rees-Mogg was right on the issue of abortion and rape," and I recommend it to you. It's written by Dr. Anthony McCarthy, SPUC's Director of Education, Communications and Research. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset, defended without compromise and with compassion the right to life of unborn children in a television interview with Piers Morgan on ITV's Good Morning Britain earlier this month. He deserves, that's Jacob Rees-Mogg, that is, the deep gratitude of everyone involved in a historic struggle against abortion. And I sincerely hope that before the end of this coming week, every single one of us attending this conference will have written to Jacob Rees-Mogg expressing our appreciation. That's our homework, I suggest. The fact that Jacob Rees-Mogg, a prominent figure in British public life, made such an unequivocal statement opposing abortion in all circumstances, regardless of the obvious cost to his future political career, is of immense importance in our campaign for life. Now, for 50 years, brave members of Parliament have been prepared to defend unborn children, and we thank them for their courage and sacrifice in standing up for the most persecuted minority in British history. Nearly 9 million unborn persons killed in 50 years in Britain alone, and by the abortion industry alone. That's leaving aside the killing of millions of unborn persons through the IVF industry, to name just one other example. I think, for example, of the late Dr. Kevin McNamara, former MP for Hull Central, who died last month on the 6th of August, who was one of the 29 MPs who voted against the termination of pregnancy bill on the 22nd of July 1966, subsequently the Abortion Act 1967. May he rest in peace. What singles out Jacob Rees-Mogg amongst members of Parliament and his courageous witness for special appreciation is that he defended unborn children without exception, including in the tragic situations of rape and incest. And he did so with composure and with compassion. The reason Mr. Rees-Mogg's defence of life created so much media outrage is that the pro-abortion lobby, including the pro-abortion media, instinctively understood the reasonableness and persuasive power of what he said in the public forum. As SPUC's Dr. Anthony McCarthy put it in his newspaper article earlier this week, and I quote, "The question of abortion in cases of rape has only one answer, however shocking it may be." Mr. Rees-Mogg didn't give the so-called right answer to the question, Anthony said, the one that clearly would have pleased so many people. Clearly, he sensed the deep rift in logic that any other answer than the one he gave would have created. And Anthony McCarthy concluded, "It's still safe to say that killing the innocent is something our society generally regards as absolutely wrong," unquote. Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, while seeking, as Antonia said, to reduce abortion, must make no secret of opposing or wanting the end of all abortion. Reflecting on the British Abortion Act, under which abortion, as Antonia reminded us, remains a criminal offence, except in certain circumstances, it's clear that the logical outcome of legalised abortion in certain circumstances is that abortion becomes available in all or in any circumstances. As SPUC's Dr. Anthony McCarthy has said elsewhere, the only thing which really protects society's weakest, most vulnerable human beings are moral absolutes. Once we accept that it's okay directly to kill an innocent child in the womb, the defence against killing any unborn child is torn away. The pro-abortion lobby knows that's true, and that's why they screamed so loudly when Jacob Rees-Mogg made his quiet, simple defence of human life. The Rees-Mogg TV interview reminds me of the unclean spirit crying out in the Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 1, verses 24 to 26. "What have we to do with thee, Jesus of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know who thou art, the Holy One of God." Like the unclean spirit in St. Mark's Gospel, these people who promote abortion know when they're in the presence of the truth. And we must openly and courageously stick and compassionately stick to the truth, like Jacob Rees-Mogg did in fighting our pro-life battles. In case you didn't notice, he's a Catholic, by the way, and he makes no secret of that fact, and we should learn from that too. As Bishop Michael noted in his keynote address last night, SPUC is not, by constitution or design, a Christian organisation. Not all of us would have presented our pro-life case in quite the way that Mr. Rees-Mogg did, but he showed by example that we lose nothing by acknowledging who we are. Last Tuesday, Liam Gibson, SPUC's Northern Ireland officer, Maria Medice, SPUC's international director, and I met some well-known Protestant politicians in the House of Commons. They're possibly the best-known Protestant politicians in the world. They're the members of the Democratic Unionist Party, upon whom the survival of the current government depends. They too are prepared to put their political careers at risk to defend unborn children. And it seemed very clear to us from our meeting in Westminster last Tuesday that if there's a choice between legislation going through Parliament to extend the Abortion Act to Northern Ireland, as could happen in the case of direct rule, which could happen, and bringing down the government, the Protestant politicians we met will bring down the government. So let's keep these DUP politicians and all pro-life politicians in our prayers. They will need our prayers and our hard work, lobbying and leafleting, because this is a parliament full of dangers for unborn children. Just 21 days after the general election, on the 29th of June 2017, Justine Greeling, Secretary of State for Education and Minister for Women and Equalities, wrote to MPs announcing that the Equalities Department would make funds available for women from Northern Ireland who seek abortions in England. Early the same day, John Bercow, the pro-abortion Speaker of the House of Commons, had selected an amendment to the Queen's speech put forward by Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow, calling for women from Northern Ireland to get free abortions on the NHS. Now, in view of the government's decision, Stella Creasy withdrew her amendment. It was a bitter, ironic twist, since earlier in the same day, the Court of Appeal in Belfast had ruled that Northern Ireland's abortion laws do not breach human rights, in a significant victory for the pro-life movement, in a case in which SPUC's evidence was cited by one of the judges. Now, in a press statement, I described this shocking government decision as a black day for unborn children and for mothers and democracy. A day or two later, Liam Gibson, SPUC's Northern Ireland officer, attended a meeting of pro-life groups in Belfast to discuss what had happened. The doctor present at the meeting explained the negative impact of the British government's decision, the negative impact it would have on GPs who find themselves under pressure to break the law in Northern Ireland to authorise access to free abortions paid for by the British taxpayers. The doctor said, quote, "This is a government which has been founded on the bodies of dead babies," unquote. People from Northern Ireland are pretty straight to the point, I find. The newly elected British government has abandoned any pretense of neutrality on abortion, and their decision, albeit made in panic, is aimed at undermining the substantial measure of legal protection for unborn children afforded by the law in Northern Ireland. Let's recall also that earlier this year, in the last Parliament on the 13th of March, Diana Johnson's 10-minute rule abortion decriminalisation bill, at its first and only reading in the House of Commons, passed by 172 to 142 votes. Now, of course, it didn't go on to become law, but over the years we could be reasonably certain that a government in power would not give parliamentary time for such a private member's bill on abortion. Hasn't happened since David Steele's private member back in 1966. We can't be so sure any longer with a resurgent Labour Party, with its policy of supporting a woman's right to abortion, with a key group of strongly pro-abortion Conservative MPs, and with the panicked capitulation of the new government a mere 21 days after the general election, and with Diana Johnson and her allies declaring that they will come back again with such a bill. This makes Antonia's SPUC's constituency-based lobby of MPs on the 28th of October, the 50th anniversary of the Abortion Act, to oppose the decriminalisation of abortion all the more important. Whilst no MP from those who've drawn places in the private member's ballot has so far said that they will take a bill on decriminalisation, there remains a real danger that a pro-abortion MP will find some parliamentary means to introduce such a bill, either as a 10-minute rule bill or in some other way. And this is a dangerous time, as I said, for unborn children, not only in Parliament in Westminster, but throughout the whole of the UK, in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, as well as in the Republic of Ireland. John Deegan, SPUC's Scotland's Chief Executive Officer, who introduced Bishop Michael last night, tells me that the Scottish Parliament has been at the forefront of pushing a secular agenda. John says, and I quote, "They've shown themselves to be the most radical politicians on the social issues, and party leaders across the board are strongly pro-abortion. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, was quick to offer funding for Irish women seeking abortion in Scotland, and outgoing Scottish Labour leader, Kezia Dugdale, recently wrote to SPUC Scotland proclaiming her complete commitment to decriminalising abortion." Yes, this is a dangerous time for unborn children and their mothers, but it's far from hopeless. At SPUC HQ, we're working hard, as Antonia's made clear, to ensure that our grassroots lobbyists up and down the country are well equipped for our battles ahead. And as Antonia pointed out, we've published Abortion and Women's Health, an evidence-based review on the impact of abortion on women's physical and mental health. SPUC's new publication shows there's ample evidence that abortion risks harming women's mental health. That's the 97% of abortions, as well as the others, which were on the grounds that the risk to the woman's mental health was greater than if she aborted her baby. Publication also shows, for example, that intimate partner violence is a strong risk factor all over the world, as numerous studies show. They're all cited in this document. Now, in the light of Jacob Rees-Mogg's defence of unborn children in all circumstances, including in the case of rape, these studies have a particular significance. A World Health Organization multi-country study of women's health and domestic violence found that women with a history of intimate partner violence, IPV, had increased odds of unintended pregnancy and almost 3 times the risk of abortion. Women who had experienced intimate partner violence, IPV, were more likely to experience suicidal ideation if they had a risk history of perinatal loss, whether it was abortion, stillbirth, or miscarriage. The association between IPV and repeat abortion indicates that there's a repetitive cycle of abuse and pregnancy. Now, I said a moment ago that SPUC HQ is working hard to equip our grassroots lobbyists around the country at this dangerous time for unborn children. At the same time, it's important to note with profound concern and attention that the pro-abortion groups in Britain, in particular British Pregnancy Advisory Service and Mary Stopes International, are themselves providing us with overwhelming evidence of how little the abortion industry cares about women, not to mention unborn children. Now, last December, the Care Quality Commission reported on major safety flaws at clinics run by Mary Stopes International, with more than 2,600 incidents reported in 2015, such as doctors going home for the day, leaving sedated women in the hands of nurses and healthcare assistants. Almost half of the nurses not being trained to do resuscitation. And some vulnerable women not understanding the full consequences of what they were about to do. And the Care Quality Commission report stated, quotes, "We were therefore not assured that those staff undertaking the consent procedure had the appropriate training in consent for children and young people and those with learning difficulties. We were also not assured that those staff taking consent had the necessary knowledge of the procedure proposed to be carried out so as to ensure that an informed discussion could be held as is required. This gave risk of harm to the patients," the CQC report concluded. Now, this is very compelling evidence for our grassroots lobbyists around Britain and Northern Ireland to present to local politicians. Given that women suffering from intimate partner violence, according to the World Health Organization, have 3 times the risk of abortion, how shocking that the staff of Mary Stopes International, which carries out tens of thousands of tax-paid abortions every year, were found by the Care Quality Commission not to have had appropriate training in consent for children and young people and those with learning difficulties, and that, quote, "some vulnerable women did not understand the full consequences of what they were about to do." The other high-profile abortion provider, British Pregnancy Advisory Service, BPAS, has also been savaged by the Care Quality Commissions over standards and care for women. And the document highlighted a catalogue of safety issues, including infection control procedures not being followed, no effective systems being in place to ensure resuscitation equipment was regularly checked to protect patients from avoidable harm, and incidents not being properly investigated. So we must get the message across to members of Parliament and the general public that it's the pro-life movement which cares about women, not the pro-abortion lobby. And that's why we have our mass constituency-based lobby next month on the 50th anniversary of the Abortion Act, and that's why we really must listen to what Antonia said this morning. The other great cry that you're familiar with from SPUC and from me is door-to-door leafleting. You know, 40-odd years ago when I started, I thought we should go and leaflet every house, and the 100,000 people who went on mass rallies at that time, if they could only go leafleting door-to-door, well, what an incredible impact that would have. Imagine tens of thousands of people out every couple of months going door-to-door. Now, we've been having these 50th anniversary meetings up and down the country, and any branch here hasn't had one, please organise it. You'll get perhaps 20 to 30 people, maybe less, maybe more, at the meeting. And more people are coming forward, they're understanding the impact that we can have. You know, it's a cliche. How can we get the message out to ordinary people? Now, how can we do it unless we hand them a leaflet explaining all about it? So we're publishing a leaflet especially to do with decriminalisation. So if you're not already committed to door-to-door leafleting, I don't care if you start with 2 people, you go to the same 100 houses. Don't go to any more houses or 200 houses or whatever you choose. Only when you get 2 more people do you go to more houses. But if we keep this up, you know, we've got to look ahead, we've got to sow the seeds. And please God, in a few years' time, 10 years' time, whatever it might be, we really will be getting our messages out door to door around the country. The other thing that I want to draw attention to, I mentioned the Ireland. And I mentioned the fact that we've got a battle royal over there, Patrick Buckley, who works for us in Ireland, is part and parcel of a major campaign that we're running for our international department. Alongside, I hasten to add, other pro-life groups in Ireland. We're working with Human Life International Ireland, Catholic Voice Ireland, in getting out the message, but also, especially in Ireland, where especially the people who support our work still have deep faith, and in particular a deep Catholic faith. You know, SPUC's not a religious organisation, but we don't ban it. If using our faith, if expressing things in terms of our faith is useful in protecting unborn children, then we must do it. And that's what we're doing in Ireland. There's going to be a 54-day water-only fast. Wait for it. 6 people in this country, 6 people in Ireland will be taking part, and they'll be going for 9-day water-only fasts. And we're asking people to join in with traditional Catholic prayers to Our Lady, with fasting, in joining this great campaign. And the purpose of it is to call on the please join us in 54 days of prayer and penance to implore God and His Blessed Mother to protect Ireland from abortion and to give bishops the grace to preach the gospel fearlessly and to defend unborn children. This is very important. Bishop Michael Nazarelli agreed with me when I said last night to him that bishops are the first to be called to preach the gospel of life. And it's, you know, let's be honest about it, it's one of the reasons why we have got such difficulty in the pro-life movement. But there are good bishops out there, we need to support them, and above all we need to support all of them with our prayer and penance. And particularly in Ireland, because if the 8th Amendment is removed, and SPUC was instrumental, and Phyllis Bowman, my predecessor, was instrumental in leading the battle for that amendment in 1983, and it saved countless lives, not only in Ireland, but all over the world. If that goes, untold millions of babies will be killed because of the shocking example that Ireland will give. So, you know, do think about it. If you know anybody in Ireland, relatives, tell them about this campaign. There is a leaflet that sets out the facts about the 8th Amendment and has quotations from Anthony Murphy, Pat the Crystal of Human Life International, Pat Buckley, explains about the development of the baby, and so on. Let's not kid ourselves. As I say, this is a very dangerous time politically, legislatively and culturally for unborn children. It's also a very dangerous time politically, legislatively and culturally for families, including our own families. In Scotland, in England, in Wales, in Northern Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, there are powerful politicians and media bodies who are pushing hard to strip unborn children of every vestige of the right to life and expose women not only to the harm of abortion, but to the well-documented, unscrupulous and dangerous practices of the abortionists. The abortionists who are being paid by the government through our taxes to carry out abortions. And we're facing the prospect of compulsory sex education throughout England and Wales, through which little children will be taught, including little children in Catholic schools, that little boys might grow up to marry a man and little girls might grow up to marry a woman. At this dangerous time, SPUC has a simple job to do. We tell the truth. We tell the truth. What SPUC has been endeavouring to do since we were established over 50 years ago, the first pro-life group to be established in the world. We tell the truth to politicians. We tell the truth to church leaders. We tell the truth to the general public. We told the truth in 1966 when David Steele said of the Future Abortion Act in the House of Commons, "It's not the intention of the promoters of the bill to leave a wide open door for abortion on request." 22nd of July 66. We didn't win that battle, but we sowed the seeds which grew into the pro-life movement, which has saved countless lives throughout the world. We told the truth in Ireland in 1982 when SPUC and Phyllis Bowman, my predecessor, helped in leading the battle which led Ireland's 1983 and led to Ireland's 1983 referendum and constitutional protection for unborn children, which is so much under threat today. We did win. Ireland's constitutional protection has saved countless lives. We won too in 2007 and 2008 when SPUC took the government to court in Northern Ireland and stopped them from introducing abortion by the back door, and they paid our costs. Was it 2009 we intervened in a case where BPAS was seeking to allow women to take one of the stages of the abortion drug RU486 at home. Again, it would have been used as a model all over the world. Our intervention was cited by the judge, and it was Paul Tully, SPUC's former General Secretary here, who advised our barrister of the point that the judge cited in his judgment finding against BPAS. Hey, we've lost other battles and we've won other battles. But even in the battles we lose, we sow the seeds for future success by our witness in the public forum, reaching out to the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens, preserving the truth and civilized values for future generations, on the right of senior midwives not to supervise abortions, on the personhood of the early human embryo, and on the right to life of unborn children, and on the right to women and men to the full truth about abortion, how it harms women and kills children. So this is my clarion call for SPUC's 2017 conference. Let's be inspired by Jacob Rees-Mogg and Northern Ireland's Protestant politicians, by their courage in telling the truth. And at this most dangerous of times for unborn children and their mothers throughout Britain and Ireland, let's be brave, let's tell the truth. Thank you.